So, Bun, one for you. We've been talking a lot about the war in Ukraine and Russians' threats of maybe attacking Europe. I mean, the harsh reality is it's very unlikely that Russia is actually going to throw a few bombs at Europe. But actually, there's a growing concern that whether the cyber technology that he's having a go regularly, but also there's people been having a go at Ed Miliband this week because he's been looking at energy security. You want to pack the North Sea full of wind farms, but all of those have to be connected back to the UK with cables. And those undersea cables, there's been several reports recently of some suspicious cuts in the cables. How on earth do we guarantee energy security? That could be one of the asymmetric ways that Putin has a go at the West.
Yeah. Yeah. And a way of just sort of putting us on notice, you cut a little cable, you get disruption. It's not massive, but you get disruption. It sort of puts the UK on notice that, bigger things could actually happen. I've done a bit of research on what we've got out there. It's difficult to get the exact numbers because it's moving quite quickly, but there could be around 200 different cables that connect these wind farms to the UK and also connect the wind farms to each other. There's about 4,000 plus kilometers of cabling as well. A new farm is just going live. It's got 4 gigawatts. Now, 4 gigawatts is around 4% of the total demand in the UK for electricity as a whole. And that's got 2,500 kilometers of cables, and it's got 10 substations. So those substations and the way they're connected is vulnerable. The cables are vulnerable. Now we know from our intelligence services that we suspect that Putin does scurry around in the North Sea. So I wouldn't put it past him. If he's not going to fire bullets or missiles at us, I wouldn't put him past him to go past a cable and chop it. And it has been done a couple of times, in the last couple of years anyway. And depends on how he does it. The results could be minor. They could be significant as well.
I think that the whole worry about this asymmetric warfare is that it's one thing defending ourselves militarily. It's quite another where we are vulnerable. Remember the under the Atlantic, the internet cables that run around the world, that sever one of those, and a whole way of life actually changes. There's underground gas pipelines and famously, 2 of those were struck, weren't they, just off Norway a couple of years back. There's been lots of reports of other cables being taken out that are in relatively shallow waters, and therefore it doesn't require a great deal of technology to do it. And of course, it's out of sight, out of mind. How do you prove who's cut these cables? Because
we still argue about who's cut some of the ones you've talked about.
No, exactly. And it's a real worry because it undermines our way of life. And in a way, I think this goes full circle to, we have not dealt with Putin in a firm manner. He feels emboldened. He can threaten the West. And therefore, it opens up all of these opportunities. And, that the energy is a really good example of one. But I was watching, I've got a little bit of a video clip of the Chinese doing these drones again. Beautiful patterns of dragons. But you just imagine each of those carrying a hand grenade, flying in sequence into the middle of Wembley Stadium. Absolute carnage. Are we ready for that? There's a story breaking today about drones looking in over US air bases in the UK. There are so many areas where we are vulnerable. And at the moment, Putin and his acolytes feel emboldened to have a go. Whereas what we should be doing is having a really firm fist here that says, mess with us. You come at us with a hammer, we're going to come at you with a gun. We should be a lot more robust about this stuff, because energy security, comm security, our critical national infrastructure.
Fundamental, aren't they?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can bring a nation to its knees without actually killing a single person, without firing a single bullet. I mean, if a cable is cut once, then a whole series of things have to come into play to fix it. I mean, and when all that's planned, a ship has to go out with cable on it and fix it. That whole exercise could take anything from 4 to 8 weeks. And during that time, that energy, whatever it is offline. If energy goes offline, only 2 things can happen. You've got to use some backup somewhere, which may not be available, or buy it from somewhere else, or you have blackouts. So if I was Putin, and thank God I'm not, But if I were and I wanted to do damage, what I would do, I would make 2 cuts in a cable 2 miles apart. And I'd make sure the cable that's left cannot be used. Now you've got a significant problem because you've got to send 2 miles of cable. The ships can carry that amount. You've got to send 2 miles out. Now it's a much bigger. You might not have the stock. You know, there's a whole load of things that ripple from just a very, very simple bit of sort of tactical maneuvering. And I'm not sure and it's a simple thing to talk about. It's not as though we're giving away secrets. It's not like, you know, some of the high-tech stuff, weaponry, black stuff that you deal in. This is pretty straightforward. I've not heard anybody address or say they're addressing this sort of thing.
No, and the bit that alarms me slightly, where it comes back to my military domain, is that we used to have redundancy. So we'd have lots of air bases. I was flying jets that we went out and flew off roads in Germany because we knew that the airfields would be targeted. And that redundancy costs you money. Redundancy in the area of energy security is you don't have one cable, you have a lattice of them. And it means that if any one of them is cut, actually, it doesn't make any difference at all. If it's 2 cut, but that redundancy costs you a lot of money to put in place. I'm pretty confident that at the moment we're not putting that level of redundancy into our backup because it costs more money. And I think we've moved from a period of, you know, the peace dividend where we can afford to consolidate efficiency and the like. We have to move our mindset to one where if we don't have redundancy, we have critical vulnerabilities, and they are things that there's going to be a lot of them out there, I think.
And backup energy in the UK, which means power plants that are sitting there doing nothing, waiting to be fired up.
Absolutely.
And that will put up prices to households, which, given that we were promised that electricity prices would go down £300, since that promise was made, they've actually gone up. Having to pour more oil on the water by putting the prices up for redundancy ain't going to be good. So this is tough.
A very tough one.